Yesterday, I rewatched the 2003 Hulk movie directed by Ang Lee, and originally I was gonna post a short about it, but I find that I could not put all my thoughts into it completely, and so I think it's better to do a longer video about it. So this was about like the third time I've rewatched this movie. I saw it at least once when I was younger, a second time like 4 or 5 years ago, and then the other day, yesterday when I'm recording this, when I watched it for the third time. So, starting with the story of this movie, I think it was a bit overstuffed. The movie is a little over 2 hours, like 2 hours and like 18 minutes, I think is the total runtime, something like that. And I remember when I rewatched it, yeah, like 4 years ago, as I said, that it felt long and boring. And I think it still felt long, maybe not as boring as I remembered it to be, but just I think there were some things that they could have cut down on. Like my biggest example is at the end of the movie, there's this fight scene between, the Hulk and his father, which is this kind of like absorbing man kind of thing. I think that they could have cut down that fight. I feel like we'd already gotten a conclusion with Hulk, surrendering in San Francisco to the military. And so it felt a bit weird that this, final fight scene was added on when there's already part of the movie that felt like a natural conclusion. The tone is also a bit darker than most Marvel movies, and that when Ang Lee was working on this movie, he went into it kind of like viewing the Hulk as a Greek tragedy. And I think that the Greek tragedy is kind of the father plot, with his father accidentally killing his mother and the experimentation on him and just all that stuff with his dad is like the Greek, tragedy plot. And then there's the superhero comic plot, which is the military and, being forced to run away from them and the whole stuff with, Glenn Talbot. I feel like that's the two sides of this movie, and it tries to do both, and it can be a bit confusing. And I think that's why the tone is so confusing, and that's why, as I mentioned, that what felt like a natural conclusion with that surrendering in San Francisco, that is kind of like, I guess, the climax of the superhero plot, and then that last fight with his father is like the climax of that Greek tragedy plot. And so I think that's why it just feels so weird, and like maybe if there was a way to combine or, you know, intertwine those two plots a bit more or just do one, I'm not too sure. I really enjoyed this movie going into the psyche of Bruce Banner. That is something that the MCU has not done really, at all. Even in the Incredible Hulk, it focuses more on, just the Hulk and his rage and doesn't really get into the childhood trauma that Bruce has. So I really like that this movie actually goes into it because I feel like it's a part of the Hulk that is not explored enough in the MCU. There's also just a lot of really good sequences in this film with Hulk and, him powering up. My favorite is probably the government lab when he escapes from it. I think that whole sequence is really well done and shows the rage and unstoppable, fury that Hulk has. And then one minor thing, I thought it was a bit weird that, when David Banner in the flashback accidentally stabbed the, Bruce's mom, she like goes out of the house and then like stands and like reaches out and then like the gamma bomb goes off. There's probably like symbolic thing that you can make of it, connecting it to that Greek tragedy thing, but right now, currently, I can't think of, what that means exactly. If anyone else has an idea, comment it, but I just thought it was a little weird. When watching this movie, I was trying to figure out what was up with it. I thought that the acting was a little odd and that the writing was a little odd, but I feel like it was more of the writing, and some of the dialogue was awkward, especially like the first interaction with Bruce and Betty.
Cassandra.
Hey, found you.
Betty, hey.
I hate them.
Wait, I just got here. Who do we hate?
The review board. We have to make a presentation on Tuesday. And you're gonna make it with me.
You think I should?
Yeah, you're great with that stuff. start talking about microbes and nanomeds, you sound almost passionate. Sorry. That was rude.
Look, nobody expects this to be easy. Us working together after being so close.
We were close?
Look, if I could be more... whatever, you know, just...
Don't. It's not your fault, really. Just a byproduct of my inexplicable obsession with emotionally distant men. I'll get over us.
Good for you.
Anyway, I'm just really stressed about this review. If we don't get impressive results today, we're gonna have a really hard sell come Tuesday.
Well then, let's go be impressive.
I'm not too sure. It's kind of hard to describe. I think also the acting plays a bit into it, as I don't think Eric Bana or Jennifer Connelly really have any chemistry as Bruce and Betty Ross. Like, I think they both do good, but I just could not find myself to really care about their relationship in this movie. However, I think that Sam Elliott as Thunderbolt Ross was really good casting. He does great, and you know, after this movie, he could also play the caretaker in the Ghost Rider movie. I think, you know, it'd be great to see him come back. That guy who plays Glenn Talbot, I think his name's Josh Lucas. I thought his character just felt a little odd. I'm not sure exactly how to pinpoint it. I think Nick Nolte was pretty good as you know, David Banner. It was interesting watching him, and I think that he plays into that Greek tragedy side of this movie. But I just found it weird that he was made into the Absorbing Man. I think the visuals were pretty cool. It was kind of weird though that his hands like went through the objects he absorbed. It was cool though, and it was weird that he became this like electric being, which is also like another Hulk villain called like Zax or something, I think is how you say it. I haven't read anything with this Hulk villain in it, but I just thought that was an odd choice. I mentioned the Hulk dogfight scene earlier, and that is like a core memory of this movie to me. That's the one scene that I remembered, and I think it's still a pretty cool scene. I really, like, Hulk, he punches one of the dogs in the nuts, which was just crazy. I also thought it was weird that the dogs kind of blow up into this green gamma gas, fart gas, whatever you want to call it. It was a bit weird. But I do think that this movie, in its action, allows the Hulk to be the Hulk. And I think the only MCU movie that really like did it properly was like, I guess, The Incredible Hulk, but mainly the Avengers movie from 2012. And I guess Age of Ultron did it as well, but he does get stopped by Iron Man. But this movie just allows Hulk to be unstoppable from any physical threat. And I really like that they actually, you know, did that. And Hulk is supposed to be unstoppable. In this movie, he actually grows in size with his anger, which he also does in the comics. It's a detail that I wish the MCU included. So as I mentioned before, the movie has a lot of edits that make it feel like a comic book. And when I first rewatched it, as I said, like 4-ish years ago, I thought that it was overwhelming. And I think there is still a bit of that when I rewatch this movie. But I actually ended up, like, I enjoyed the editing. I thought it is stylistic, and I can't think of any other comic book movie that has that, you know, editing to make it feel like a comic with the panels and focusing on many things at once. And just like, I don't know, I just liked it. And I think it works for this movie. But as I said, it is a bit overwhelming. And I did think that Glenn Talbot's death has like some comic book goofiness to it. And I did think it was a little bit weird. But considering the comic book aspect of this movie, I think it kind of fits that a bit. In general, I do think that the CGI actually looked pretty well. I feel like I did mention that the movie at some points feels dark. Maybe it was just my TV or something, but it was dark, and I feel like they tried to hide the CGI a bit like with that, but there's also a lot of daylight sequences, and I just think that it looks good for the most part. I think the growing effect is awesome, and it does look a bit, I guess, video gamey or just like, you know, obvious, but it is like a 23-year-old movie, and I think it does look, you know, pretty good for the time that it's from. One of the fights that I felt was really dark was the final fight. It was really hard to tell what was happening, especially when him and his father were fighting in the water, and then there's like, I think it's like a mushroom cloud that kind of comes out of the water and then they get nuked or whatever. I don't know what was happening in that final fight. It was kind of hard to tell, but I actually did really like the visual of when his father becomes like the lightning creature thing, Zazax or whatever it's pronounced, and they're like zipping through the clouds, and you kind of like they capture the lightning movement, and you can see him and the Hulk fighting. I thought that visual was a really cool idea, and I think it plays into as I mentioned, the Greek tragedy aspect of it, as like there are these two gods, fighting in the clouds above the citizens of the people of Earth. That's kind of the vibe I got from that, and it just looked really cool, I think. One of my favorite things about this movie, though, was just the music from Danny Elfman. I thought it was really good, and, Danny Elfman did Spider-Man, the Batman movies from, like, 89 and 92, I think's the other one, and, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and I actually just really like the theme. I think it's pretty underrated when you think about the superhero music that Danny Elfman has done. My initial reaction when I finished the movie was like, wow, that was pretty good. And I think there are a lot of improvements you can make, of course, but I think it is the most accurate characterization of Bruce and his mental, just his trauma, his childhood trauma, and just the accuracy of his power and allowing the Hulk to be just angry. I think it is the best and most accurate portrayal of that. And I do like all the swings that this movie takes with it. It may not hit them all, but I can appreciate the movie for, trying to be different in this, early era of Marvel movies before the MCU, in the aughts. This is 2003 when this movie came out. And I think Marvel learned some pretty good lessons from it, from how he was portrayed in the Avengers. And I think, we need to get Savage Hulk back. And, I would love for him to get another solo project. I think overall this movie is like a 6 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10. It's just, it's kind of hard to give it a number, but I think it is in that area of just, being pretty good. Yes, it may feel a bit long and a bit boring, but I think it does a lot of interesting things, and it is just interesting to watch, as you can see, as I mentioned, like the lessons they learn from this movie into comes into forming the MCU. But if anyone watches it and makes it this far, thank you for watching. If you would leave a like, that'd be appreciated, and if you could subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this, that'd be appreciated as well. Also, leave a comment if you agree with anything I said, disagree if there's just anything I forgot, but, thank you for watching.